Hello, everybody, and welcome to Truth Be Told. Thank you very much for listening in. I'm excited because we're starting a new series today, and the person I'm interviewing is already laughing at me, so that's a good start to the episode. This new series we're starting, I thought would be interesting because a while ago I gave a message at church about kind of demographic relationships and how that can be really difficult in a church that's supposed to be unified, but obviously has all these differences of opinion, differences of method, or different needs, and we can kind of get a little bit contentious with this. So I thought it'd be really cool if we could interview like a person from each demographic, at least age-wise, and just see how they view things in the church, see how they perceive their church experience, their relationships within the church. And so I decided for the youngest group, kind of like the teen age group, I'm going to be interviewing my friend Ani, and she's joining us today. I'm really excited because Ani is just an incredibly smart person. She reviews her Bible constantly. She challenges me on things whenever I misspeak in a podcast. She'll send me a text and say, "Hey, dummy, you shouldn't say this like this," and we'll have little discussions back and forth. I really love talking with her, and she's just such an upstanding person. So I'm excited to have this conversation with her. I think she'll represent her age group well. And I'd also want to mention, if you're not a part of our church, Ani and I go to the same church, though I'm in Ohio, she's up in the Northeast, but it's like the same organization. And so if you're not a part of our organization, a part of our church, I still think this is valuable. There's going to be a lot to learn because problems within churches across the board seem to be kind of similar. So you might experience some of these same problems, and maybe you're in an older demographic at your church and want to relate to the younger demographic. This would be a great episode for you. So I think everybody is going to benefit from this. But mainly, I'm just excited to talk to my friend Ani. How's it going, Ani? Feeling good today?
Yeah, I'm excited.
I need a little more excitement than that. That didn't even sound remotely excited.
um, I'm I'm really excited. I'm happy I can do this because it's exciting for me to be able to do something where I can like try and represent what I think, and also like show people how much I love God.
Yeah. Do you think that this is not a question that I sent you? This is just me asking you as a person. Do you think that you get asked your opinion very often? Like the younger groups of people? Do you feel like kind of, we talked about this a little bit beforehand, that I just wanted to get your view of things and also kind of how you perceive the younger people in the church. Do you think that you guys are often asked your opinion on like how things are going, or how you're doing?
I couldn't like necessarily speak for other people. I don't know if I've witnessed that much, but I have definitely not necessarily been asked a lot of like what I think about church and things, which is why this is so nice. But it's just like I feel like I haven't been asked that a lot. Like it hasn't really come up like at church or any of the church functions I go to.
Sure. Yeah, and actually you bring up a good point, because I also want to mention that you're speaking for yourself. Where you can, you'll obviously speak on behalf of kind of like your age group, but obviously every person's different. So you're not going to have like the perfect answer for every person. So, that's okay. So if you're listening and you're like, that's not what I think, well, that's fine. That's what Ani thinks. And that's what we're talking about today. So hopefully she's representative in some ways, but in the ways she's not, she's an individual. So that's all good. Well, yeah, I was talking a couple weeks ago with an older lady in the church, and she even said that she feels like she's never been asked some of these same questions before. And I've not interviewed her on the podcast, but she felt like as a woman, she's not been asked questions of like, how are things going? What do you think about the Bible? She just kind of listens and like takes in information, but doesn't often get to share. So hopefully, you kind of fit both of those. You're a girl and you're younger. So I'm looking forward to hearing what your perspective is. So the first question I had for you, kind of just a very basic, like let's get started question, and that is, what do you think an ideal church would look like?
Well, there's a lot of things that like I could definitely say about the church that is like obviously we don't do everything right, but I know we all try to do everything right, like according to the Bible and how God wants us to do it. So I feel like I shouldn't say much, and I have things definitely. I think that an ideal church could do a lot of things that our church can't because we're still of the world. You know,
Hmm.
we're not completely in God yet. We could have less judgment and a lot of things. You know, we need to use the Bible and our love for God more, and we need to like to speak about how much we love God always, because that is something that's really important. It should be brought up constantly,
Hmm.
because that's what our church is about.
Yeah, and I don't even mean like when I say what do you think an ideal church would be like, maybe it's things we're already doing, but like if you were to start from the ground up, like let's say you don't go to church and you're like, what would I want in a church? Like what would be the perfect thing for a church? How would you describe, like you've already talked about kind of the things we would talk about or emphasize a little bit more, but what about like the community? How would that go? How would people interact with each other? And you even talked about judgment a little bit, so that kind of speaks to that as well.
Well, I think from like the ground up, if I was doing that, I would start with what kinds of people you're trying to interact with. I would try to like maybe bring it to like the easiest level of understanding, like take it from the Bible and make it just really easy for everyone to understand. And then just make sure everyone completely knows what our church is about, like what we're trying to make. Also for everyone to understand that like we are of the world still, but we shouldn't be of the world. Like we shouldn't be bringing components of the world into our church. We shouldn't be making it like that. It would be really good if we just really tried to set our differences aside and unite, like as it says in I don't know what song it is, but like the diverse yet truly one,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's such a hard thing to do. And that's kind of why we're talking about this, because, I think that some people that are a bit older in the church think that they understand the younger people because they've been young before, you know? And some of the younger people are like, I don't know if you get it. And they kind of don't trust that the older people get it. So we're definitely diverse, but how would we become truly one? And obviously you're talking about like, well, I mean, really be in the Bible. Don't try and overcomplicate things. That's really, really important. But what about like relationship wise? What's something that you feel you could do personally, and maybe just your generation to become like you're going to be different. You guys are going to be younger than the older people, obviously. But what's something you could do to be truly one? Or maybe something, what's the older generation that they could do to be truly one with you guys?
You brought up that the older people think that like they know how it's like, and I that definitely is true. They definitely do, but it's different because the generation that they lived in was different than like you know what I mean. It's like it's a different time period and different like things. Like they've been an adult in this time period, but they haven't been a child in this time period. But I think for us to be truly one, we should all be talking like how you said, like does anyone ask you questions about like your opinion on church? And that's really important. People should be talking about that. People should talk to each other and communicate. Like it shouldn't be like a shy subject. Of course, like obviously like the older generation, they've already been through a whole life and they've like, gotten baptized and seen so many things happen. And of course we also have to learn because we're all children of God still, but they're older and they understand more things. So they could also like keep asking questions, but also like turning it into something that's like more like inclusive, like with everything with everyone. Because if they want to get to know like the younger generations and the younger generations want to get to know like the older, then we could do like something that's like we're all talking together, we're all speaking the truth, and we're all like communicating with like the Bible and things and asking questions that maybe you feel like you can't ask, because like maybe not always out of respect, but like like you're scared to ask them. And you're like, oh, what how are they going to respond to these questions? And if you have like a lot of questions, you want to talk to people, and you're like, well, I don't know how to ask this, or you feel like, well, I think I know how to ask this, but I don't know how it's going to come across like from my point of view.
Yeah. Do you have an example of one of those questions? Because that happens all the time where it's like, man, I don't know. I kind of don't have all the answers here, and I have so many questions, and some things, maybe you heard something at school, or, um, you just came across something in your study, like in the Bible, that you don't understand. You're like, I'm afraid that if I ask this, they're going to think that I'm questioning them, or I'm doubting what they say. And it's like, no, I just don't know. I just want to know. So do you have any examples of questions like that? I think often it's like things that you feel guilty about, maybe, or like things you feel ashamed for not knowing or understanding as well as you feel like you should.
Definitely. Like things that like might happen in your day and you're like, well, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have done that, or I don't think that was right, or maybe someone said something like that to me and I want to ask someone about that in the church. Like it's like two different worlds kind of. Like I have like my regular world and like my spiritual world, and it's like it's hard because I'm like that's who I want to be. I want to be acting like a Christian. I want to be spreading my shining my Christian light, but it's hard to do that because you're not in that environment. It's so hard like when you're at camp and you feel it. You feel like the love and God's with you. When you leave, it feels so hard because you're returning to the world and you feel like just like kind of lost again. Like you're found and then you're lost, and it's hard. But that would be something like like if you want to ask your pastor about like a specific event and you're like, I don't know because this is like not very good or embarrassing or something, and I just want to clear it up, but maybe I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be your pastor, you know what I mean? Like you could talk to, I mean, anyone that you feel like. Hopefully there are people we still feel comfortable with, even if they're not our pastor, that are just older than us, that might have lived through life, that we respect and that we like and feel comfortable with. Yeah, so I think maybe like what you're saying is just kind of like as advice to the older people. Like there are times where you feel uncertain, or that you don't really know an answer, either in how you should act or what you should know or think about a certain thing,
Exactly, yeah.
or like coming home from camp, even, where you're like, man, I just kind of want to still feel like I'm in that positive zone. And you're hoping that the older people in your congregation that have like been through that know that and can kind of make that for you at church a little bit, right?
Yeah. And then like it is other questions too, like about like everything in the world, and it's like it's so hard because the world is just completely gone from God and just like varying often to like so many different things, and it's really hard to come back to church every week and be like feeling like so good about God, but then like leaving and you're like you don't feel that way anymore, or like you go and you're just like scared about everything because of how the world is going, and but you shouldn't be scared though, not about necessarily about like the world, but just like how everything is.
So do you feel like your church has like a decent place that you can go to, and like your congregation, I mean, do you feel like your congregation has a place you can go to where you do feel like a little bit safer, or could they improve? And this isn't me asking you like, um, are they bad or do you not like them? It's not like that. It's more just like, this is still on the idea of what your ideal church would look like. And you're expressing that, you guys are facing a lot of pressures in the world. And so they kind of need to act as like a safe place for you and a place that you feel cared about. So do you feel like we kind of have that really strong in our church, or do you think we could improve on it? And kind of how would we do that, if so?
I think we have some of that, and I mean we can always improve though, but I think we do have that. There is a lot of people that you can definitely go to for anything, like and anytime, like a lot of people that you can definitely talk to, not necessarily like not like calling out anyone in my church or anything, but
Right,
like
right.
it's that my church is has like older people, so it's not as easy to like to always like connect. But I definitely have like people I could go to, and I think that's the same for a lot of people at church, where like they have like people at church who they understand, especially like their friends, and if they have like someone to talk to, like a pastor, or just like a maybe like a married couple, or just like anyone.
So, with sticking kind of with this like generations thing, because that's kind of what I'm hoping to draw out of this a little bit. Do you feel that in our church, or in your congregation specifically, or just in your experience, do you feel that your generation, like the younger people, are undervalued or maybe like underappreciated? Or do you feel like we got it going pretty good and you feel properly appreciated. So it could be as far as like service goes, or it could be as far as people seeking your opinion on things or how you'd like things to be. Do you feel like you guys as a younger group are undervalued or maybe overvalued or properly valued?
I think that we are properly valued because, you know, sometimes people give sermons and they talk about the little children and like in the Bible and how Jesus really appreciates the little children. He thinks they're a gift, and I think we are all gifts from God, and we everyone in the church are children. We are all children of God, but in like age wise, I think we could definitely be probably better valued. But camp is a really good example of like where we are really valued and people appreciate us and they want us to have fun and learn about God.
Personally, I think a church should be like a family, like a congregation especially should be like a family where the kids, they know that they're kids. They know that the parents are going to make the decisions, but it's really nice when parents can ask like, like, are you happy? Or, like, do you want to go do this today? Or, they just consider the kids' opinions on things.
Also, like I'm thinking of like older people, and they can like see them, and I feel like I see them like looking like at the feast and things when I see like children running by, and I see like the older people looking at them and smiling, and I think that's just, I mean, I know that's like a weird example kind of, but
No, that's good.
I think that's like it's really nice because it's like it's not like anyone's gonna like scold them like stop running, stop laughing, because like that's what God loves when he sees little children, like laughing. And I think that's great.
So you said that like Jesus sees children as a gift. So I'm curious, like, do you feel like you are treated as a gift? And sometimes I'm sure you're not a gift. Sometimes I'm sure you're rotten to the core.
Oh, of course, always. I do feel like definitely I am valued at times. I remember at camp I was talking to it's okay if I name a name or should I not?
You're okay, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Parker. I was talking to Mr. Parker, and I was telling
Steve
him I was
Parker?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, the one
Oh,
from
yeah,
Texas.
love him. Yep.
He's great. I love him. He gives us like such an amazing like love. Like you can just feel it. But anyways, so I was talking to him, and I was just kind of telling him like I was having a little bit of trouble at school, like at lunch and stuff. And he was talking to me and he was like really being like reciprocal. He was like listening and he was like, well, how about tomorrow we sit together or like our whatever, not sit together, but talk. We can talk and we can find out like a plan. Like like where are you gonna sit at lunch? And I was like, this is so nice because it's like someone's like really listening and they're paying attention and they're valuing me.
Hmm.
And like they're thinking about my opinion and how I feel and how I think.
That's so good. I know Mr. Parker is one of the nicest guys. I know I'm gonna send this to him because he would love to hear like how that affected you. He's such a good guy. So to someone listening then, like I'm assuming people that are going to listen to this might be people who want to understand, how to relate to you better. They want to become like Mr. Parker, right? So what are some things they can do? I mean, wouldn't it be great if you didn't just see Mr. Parker at camp, but you saw him like in some way in every single person at church? Like you went to church and you felt like everybody there treated you just like he treated you there at camp. Like, wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be so nice.
Right. So what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking, I want to become like that. I want to help them in their life. I want to be a person that has that relationship with them. What advice would you give to that person who's trying to become like Steve Parker for you?
You would just really, really try to like listen and like think about like what he did, like what can we do to make this better? And like, think about that and be like, yeah, I can hear what they're saying. Of course I have my own opinion about it, but I think right now like the best thing I can do is like listen to what they're saying and think about like what opinion would help them.
That's so good. Wow. Okay, so this is kind of just something I was just thinking of as far as what might help people to appreciate you guys a little bit more, like that gift idea. I love that gift idea, and I love that you keep saying that everyone is a child of God. You know, Paul does that in the book of Ephesians. He's like, he'll talk about marriage and he says, you know, to you married couples, let me talk to you. And then at the end, he says, but remember, every single one of you is married in a way because that's your relationship with Jesus Christ. And then he talks about kids and parents. And he says, I'm going to talk to you kids. I'm going to talk to you parents. And he says, but remember, all of you are kids to God, you know? And he just brings out all these examples. He's like, you are all of these things to God. So you need to, you know, we can all relate as children in some way. So it's really good to relate to children and to teens and to young adults. I just think that's so good. And it's good for us, like some of the younger people, you know, younger than like 80 maybe, to relate to them because, you know, that's kind of our relationship with God. So we need to try and reflect that as often as we can. But as I was thinking about this, like you guys as considering you guys as a gift, I'm curious what you think your generation's greatest strength is and maybe what your greatest weakness is.
Our greatest strength is, of course, God, because He's always there.
I love that your mind immediately, when I say what's your greatest strength and you're going to what is the thing that makes me strong? That's so good. And I love that God was your first answer. I'm more asking though, what is your best quality? Like what is the greatest quality that the younger generation has that like the church could benefit from? And what's maybe your guys' weakest quality?
Well, our strongest quality is probably like picking each other back up. Like, sorry, I keep on going back to camp, but that's a really big one.
No, that's
When
good.
like if like someone's like struggling on like maybe like a different activity, and like everyone's like cheering them on, and you can feel like the love, and you know that, and yeah, I said that before, but um that's a really big strength. But like a quality, like a trait, kind of, I guess that could be like kindness and like compassion. Like when you do that towards someone else, that's a really big strength. And when someone does that to you, that's like a strength as well.
Hmm. Do you find opportunity to use that in a church setting? Like if you guys are really encouraging, I mean, I go to camp, you know, and I see how you guys act, and it's always motivating and inspiring to me because I'm just like, man, they have a lot of energy for encouragement. But then sometimes you go to church, and like the younger people might not ever go talk to an older person who might need some of that encouragement. You know, do you think you guys like would you agree that maybe you guys could use it more for like just in a general church setting if you were more comfortable with like older generations?
Definitely. Like if we were like, you know, in a church setting, and we were maybe like sticking to like the people that we knew, like our friends and stuff. And instead of doing that, you could go up and talk to someone, and like maybe if someone's like looking kind of like down or something, it can be hard to like go up to someone and like be like just like start a conversation. I mean, although I feel like for me personally, I think it's easier to go up to someone older than it is like younger or my age.
Are you familiar with that verse that talks? Paul writes it where he says the church is a spiritual body knit together by what every member supplies. Have you heard that before?
Not necessarily, but I think that goes along with what I was saying before, like, you know, like diverse yet true. Sorry, diverse yet truly one. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know that verse, but that one, it goes along with that. I think I might have actually read that one, but yeah,
Yeah, so like if you were to look at a human body, which is like the kind of comparison that Paul's drawing there, he's saying like, you know, there's fingers and there's toes and there's eyes and there's ears and they're all different, but they all kind of serve the body, right?
yeah, yeah. I
And
have
I
read that one.
okay, yeah, and I think that it's for each person. Like this is just a personal opinion. I think it's backed up by scripture though. I think each person has a responsibility to look at themselves and say, what do I have to offer? Like what are my strongest qualities that God has produced in me that I can give to the church, right? And it can be kind of a scary thing to give because, especially in this world, like there's a lot that requires our time and our attention and our energy, and things get busy. And so sometimes on Saturday, you know, when we get to church, all you want to do is just kind of relax, you know, and just like listen to
Yeah,
a message and just
yeah,
hang out with your friends and whatever. But it can be hard to go to church and think, okay, what do I have to give this week? Because you might not feel like you have much to give. But everybody has a unique strength, right? Just like your fingers have a certain type of strength, but your arm muscles have a different kind of strength. And your ears have a strength of hearing that your fingers don't have. So what would you say to like the younger people that are looking to find what is it that I bring to the table? What's the thing that I supply to the church? And how would you encourage them to use those things? Or maybe you can talk about something that you have. I know you don't want to brag about yourself, but something you feel like you have that's a strength that you bring to the table. Because sometimes I think people are looking for opportunities to feel like they're a part of the church, but they don't really know where they fit in, especially when they're younger. So maybe do you have any words for like your generation of people that might want to know, like, how do I fit into this? What do I have to offer?
Like, how do you discover that? Or
Yeah,
like,
or what do you see? Like when you look around at your friend group, like at camp, and you already talked about encouragement, right? Like that's a strength that you guys have. What are some other things you guys have that you could bring into a church setting when you look at your friends and say, man, they are just really good at this? Or, they have this quality that's so great. I wish that they brought that to church a little bit more. Because you guys really, like if you imagine the younger people are the eyeballs of the body, right? And
yes,
you guys are really good at seeing things. That's what eyes are good for. But then you come to church and you close your eyes the whole time. Well, then the eyes aren't good for anything, right? So, what's the strength? Like, what's the thing you guys have? And how would you encourage young people to use it at church, like opening their eyes in that kind of metaphor?
you could always go out of your comfort zone and just try and do something to help someone else, even if you are like uncomfortable with it. And that's like a really big strength that you could use for anyone or any time. And it doesn't always have to be in church. But when you are in church, don't close your eyes, like you said. Keep them open and try and just like keep doing what you think is right, and ask God for what you think He think is right. He thinks is right. It's like it's a huge thing, talking to people, communication, and and like really learning about like someone else's life and how they are and how they act, and understanding like how they think about God, because that's also helping you learn.
So, what is something that you wish older generations of people, and this could be me, this could be my generation, this could be your parents' generation, this could be like grandparent generation. What is something that you wish they understood more about you guys as like the teen group?
As a group, I think a lot of people maybe haven't completely found how they think of God yet. I think all of us that are like going to church and everything, we're trying to do what's right. One thing I wish other generations would know about ours is like at least me. I know I want to have people talk to me about God. I want them to know how much love I have, and for other people too. I think maybe that, but also like if they don't know, like if they are maybe just new to the church, or they don't completely know how they feel about God yet, to just like try and understand that more, because not everyone is like thinking the same. And also other generation, like older people might be thinking that we already know certain things that maybe we don't know yet, or that we don't know anything at all. We already know certain things. And I think it's important for them to like maybe think about what we know and what maybe we don't know, and try to help us learn more, because that's why we're here. We are a family, like you said. We are together, and we need to help each other and build each other up to become more like God.
Yeah, that was a really good answer. Originally when you were talking about newer people in the church, I was kind of confused because in my mind, newer people, they could be younger, older, like who knows. But I think what you were saying is, and like again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you were saying people, like younger people, might know less about the Bible, and there might even be some older people that are newer to the church that know less about the Bible, and you guys find yourself like you're kind of in the same predicament where you don't want the older people to think that that doesn't mean you're serious about the Bible or serious about God. Like you still want to have these deep connections. You look at what the older people have and you're like, I want that. Help me to have that. So whether you're
Yeah,
younger
exactly.
and you've grown up in the church, or just younger in the faith, like you don't understand as much, you've got the same problem that you're hoping the older people can help you with, which is maybe by having deeper conversations or just showing you how they got to where they are, or their relationship with God, and kind of guiding you in that. You're saying that would be really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good. You mentioned earlier in the conversation, like even the older people still have more to learn. We're all children of God, so we're all supposed to be on that learning process. But if you're farther along, it's, one thing you could learn is how to teach and guide other people, even in just our relationships, even if it's not just about what the Bible says here or what it says here, but in their relationship with God, you can teach someone how to have that relationship with God that they have or that they've found.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. So we have two more questions. They're kind of related in a way. And the first one's going to be a little bit trickier because it's a little bit more negative. So I'm hoping, I know that, being a younger person, it's hard to try and say something wrong about the church or maybe an older person or whatever. And I'm not trying to get you to like slander anybody or scream at them or anything. But I am curious, what do you see as the biggest problem that the church has? And I want to be clear because I'm asking this because at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about what the ideal church would be, right? And you said one that doesn't focus so much on judgment, but focuses on how much we love God. And, then we kind of talked about the generations and how they're different and what strengths you guys have, but how you might be misunderstood in some ways. And so across the board, though, what is the thing where you see it as, like, what's keeping us from being that ideal church in your mind? What's the thing we could improve on the most?
Well, the ideal church that I was talking about before, I mentioned judgment. I have other things on here that I was saying, but I shouldn't necessarily have said judgment. But there were other things like that. I think there are a lot of things I think we could definitely work on.
Wait. Why should you not have said judgment? Like, do you think a church should be? Are you changing your mind and thinking an ideal church should be like super judgy?
No, no. I just because I said judgment and I was like, it was just like it was like the only thing the only negative thing I said, but it was just because I didn't want to say like a bunch of things like because the ideal church and like the problem of the church kind of go hand in hand because you can't have like an ideal church without naming like the things that you could do better about the church, which are the problems.
Right.
But the problems, there's things that I definitely think are smaller that I mentioned before that we were talking about that the church is more worldly, I guess. There are a lot of things that I could say about the world that we definitely do. Like sometimes it feels like it can be like a popularity contest in the church, and I definitely think that is something that we could work on. But I understand that it's like, I'm not saying it's like good that we have that, but it's like it's hard to like differ from like the world because that happens in like school and like jobs and it just in your life. It's like there's like people on top and there are people on the bottom, like that's how our society is set up. There are things that go along with that, like better than like I'm better than you, kind of. Not that we necessarily have that. We just have people who are more like known, Sorry, I'm not calling out anyone specifically, but just generally.
Hey, okay. Hold on. Start your answer over.
Yes,
Don't try and make apologies for things you're saying. I'm asking you how you feel, right? I'm not asking you to say, I know you're trying not to step on toes right now. You're trying not to say we're the worst, I hate everything, I hate everybody. You're not saying that. We all know that you're not saying that. But everybody in the church would admit that we've got problems, because no church is free from problems. We're all human. So, we're going to have problems. All I'm asking you is, what are things we could work on? And so you're answering very well. Like the popularity contest thing, I'd love for you to go into more of that. It's a good answer. So you're not saying anything wrong, but I don't want you to feel like you have to keep saying like, well, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, or I'm not trying to say this, or I'm not trying to, we know you're not trying to badmouth anybody or anything. Give your free answer, because then we'll talk about the best things our church has, But right now, you're not trying to say, I hate everybody and everything. You're trying to say, here's my experience, and here's what I would love to see improved on. And that's totally okay. So go for it.
I think that also goes with like when you're going somewhere, like at one of the church events. I know I personally have come back sometimes feeling kind of bad about myself and feeling like I don't like I shouldn't like it doesn't feel like church. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that, and Satan is trying to pull us apart more and more. It's hard because he's obviously targeting us a lot because we are in the church and we have our trials that God tests us with, and it can be really hard. Obviously, something that we can't exactly control, but we have to go from where we are to like where we want to be. Another thing that we definitely I think we have to work on is along with being like popular and stuff at school. It might feel like you have to like dress a certain way or act a certain way to like fit in with that crowd. Like and you have to like change your personality and you have to be like a certain way exactly. And it's I think it's a little bit more loose in the church, but it's also like it's it's definitely there. It's hard to be with people who are like that because it's like they're not always like real, and you have to be a certain way around them. You have to change yourself around them, not drastically, but it's enough where I just like I don't want to be like this. I want to be myself. I'm at camp, or I'm at where for the weekend, or I'm at the feast, and I don't want to act like I'm like I have to be a certain way around you because you're like too cool for me. And sometimes it's very much like that in the church. Sometimes it's hard to escape though, with all the things that happen to us, and it's like it's really hard to escape all the stuff that happens. We also have to remember we're working towards God's plan, God's kingdom, um, and everything after that. And we have to work together as a church and just forget about all the stupid stuff and just try to act like how we would act if God was right next to us.
So you were talking about the popularity contest thing and how that's kind of prevalent in the church, and I've definitely seen that, like even at camp. Do you think that some of the adults kind of make that problem a little bit worse? Like I know, obviously as kids when you experience that at school all the time, that's just how things are in the world. It's really easy to let it come into the church. But do you think that the adults could do something to kind of maybe not make that happen as often? Or do you think maybe we're causing that problem a little bit?
They can be like that, and they can have their children be like that, and maybe without even realizing it, they're like that. And that's something that I think definitely can be created by them. But also they could also like do things to probably stop that, like maybe like not putting like certain people to like I'm thinking about camp right now, like maybe like putting like certain people together. That's probably more prevalent in like the girls dorm. But I think if they were like watching, and because it can also go like hand in hand with like inclusiveness, because like if you're like a certain kind of person and you want to hang out with certain kind of people.
hmm And that, I mean, it's okay to have friends and everything, like people you gravitate towards, but that doesn't mean that you can allow it to get to the point, like as a counselor, I've been a counselor at camp, and you definitely see some kids that are more popular than other kids. And like on one hand, that's okay, if they're like funny or loud or whatever, it's like, okay, yeah, people are going to like that kid, but it doesn't mean we can let this other guy, and well, I'm speaking from the guys' dorm, it doesn't mean we can let this other guy over here like sit in the corner by himself. Like he's got to feel included and appreciated and respected and be shown that he has strengths. So it's like, it's okay as long as everybody is like the popular guy or girl in certain areas, right? But if one person is just dominating the whole time, I know like especially in sports at camp, like I think competition's really good, but you go to camp and if it's all competition all the time, and like this kid's always getting picked first for everything, it's like, well, it's good that that kid feels like, hey, I have a strength in sports, that's really good, but you also need other areas that other kids can feel like, hey, I helped, maybe in like it's really good if you got one kid in the dorm that's really good at sports to tell them like, hey man, you are excelling at sports, like you're really killing it. But if another kid is like being a good encourager or volunteering to help out, like to encourage that just as much so that the rest of the dorm is like, wow, man, this guy over here, he's doing great things too. So that everybody feels good, right? And so that's a way I think that adults can kind of hurt that popularity contest thing. We can kind of make it happen if we just don't recognize it and try and fix it, or like encourage people in their strengths in other areas. I'm not saying it's all on the adults to fix that, but I definitely see it happening in like a younger age group. And I'm like, man, I feel like we could do a lot to help that out and not just like pick favorites, because those, like, maybe they're 12 years old or whatever at camp, and it might be a simple thing of like, well, I'm just picking a favorite for this sport or whatever. Like, that's fine, whatever. But that can quickly become like, oh, that's the one that clearly the counselors love the most. And then they go back home and those kids are like really arrogant. And, it's just like that stuff can compound. And someday you guys are going to be like the leaders in the church. And you don't want someone who's learned to be the most popular, to get like all these accolades and glory, because maybe they're a little conceited or arrogant and they need to be humble and serving, and then you've got other kids that maybe, I know, I'm really glad you go to camp and have a good time, but there could be some kids that go to camp and they feel like, I don't fit in, I wasn't chosen, I'm not good at anything. And then they go back home and that's how they feel about church in general, My goal here is like, I would love if the people that went to camp and loved it so much also came home and went to church on Saturday and loved it just as much. Like, if we could have those same relationships at camp that we do in our regular churches at home, that would be so great. And I do think there's things we can do to get there. But obviously we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. Your answer was like a lot better than mine. I really like your answer, but I mean, like, it wasn't like you were like reiterating what I said, but you were like adding much of like the answer in there, because I can't like begin to like try and figure out like what to do about that, because it's like, it's something that I know is there, but it's always there and it's always going to be there. I mean, obviously it's not always going to be there, but it's going to be there, and it's hard to get rid of.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to like monopolize or like take your answer away from you. I just think
No,
like you were giving a good answer, and I was trying to make sure that I understood, and also was like, yeah, that's kind of, I want to take responsibility of that and say, here's how I could maybe help that, or how older generations could fix that problem for you guys. And that's really good, because I wanted you to come on this podcast and say, here's kind of some problems I see, here's some good things I see, here's what I hope for. That's what I want. And then I want the older people to try and listen to you and say, okay, how can I help that situation? How can I be a better servant to someone like Ani, or, her generation of people? That's what I'm hoping happens here. Okay, so we do have one more question. I want to ask you to end on a positive note here, because you've just been so negative this whole time.
I know. I'm negative.
No, you are not negative at all. But I do want to end on a positive note. What do you think is the best thing we have going on in our church culture? It doesn't have to just be like, well, we really read our Bibles. Like, that's such an important thing. But about the culture or the community, what are some things that you think like are really working towards that? You mentioned earlier being diverse yet truly one. What are some of our positives in that area that help us to become like that?
Well, I have like kind of like a general statement, kind of, but I think a lot of churches, I think that you can look at those and be like, they're doing things that like they don't have the love that we do. Like I said it before, like we have aspects to our church that other churches could like dream of having, and they don't always want to have that. And I think it's really important, because we have like amazing things about our church. We can communicate and we can talk, and we have like such an amazing respect, and we like go off of the Bible, and we're like, yes, this is like their love and respect that we should have. And even though sometimes like I can go away from camp, or sorry, not necessarily camp, but anywhere, and feel kind of bad, you can also go away from something and feel like amazing. Like, I want that to last. I want that love to last. And I love that feeling. Like, the feeling like where it's like you feel so loved and like accepted, and like at school and like at work and things, you don't feel that. it's so rewarding because it's like an example. Solomon would like look and look and look, but there was nothing, like nothing compared to God. Like everything was meaningless except for God and like God's people. And as long as we're just trying to be like a really good example of that, it feels so good coming away from that and like being in that in the moment. And that's why you don't want it to end. You're like, I don't want to go back to like grimy school.
Like, our potential for good is so much greater in the church than outside of the church. And so even though we don't live up to it all the time, like it's something that is so worth fighting for, you know? Like maybe you go to camp and you don't feel good, but you know that the times where you go to camp and feel good is like the best thing ever. So you're like, if we could just get that all the time, that would be the best. Or you know that going to church feels better than going to school, but sometimes you go to church and it doesn't feel that good. You're like, if we could just get that good all the time, you know, it's so much better than the good anywhere else, even though we don't have it as often as we'd like to have it.
Eventually it will be like, it will like everything will be like, it will feel like that, and it'll be like that in the kingdom and with God, and it'll be amazing. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, you are probably one of the people, you're probably the youngest person that I've ever met that has like the strongest desire for the kingdom of God that I've ever met. Every time I talk to you about it, you're like, oh man, I cannot wait for that. And I think to a lot of people, especially your age, when you say like, are you looking forward to the kingdom of God? They're like, yeah, no, that'll be cool. Like we'll all be at peace and we'll be happy. And they kind of have general answers, which is fine. You know, you grow in that. But you seem to have such a vision for it. You're just like, I cannot wait. Like I don't know, there's like a palpable excitement about you when you talk about it. So that is so cool. That's like one of my favorite things about you because it helps me to see it. And so, you know, we were talking about strengths and weaknesses of, you know, older and younger people sometimes. I think the ability for younger people to imagine things, like their imagination, is so great. And as you get older, you kind of lose some of your imagination. You lose some of your wonder. And so every time I talk to you and like there's these moments where you're just like, I cannot wait for that, it makes me excited. I'm just like, yes, you're right. I can't wait for that. So yeah, I mean, just personally, I would say that is a strength you have that you need to go to your church and share with people, because there's a lot of older people that may need their vision sharpened in that area, you know? So definitely use that to your strength, because I mean, you can't help but be loved by everybody if you're giving them a clearer vision and a clear like desire for what's next. That's such a great thing you have. I just love it.
Thank you.
So I'm going to give you a minute or two. You said you have so much to say and you could talk forever. So I want to give you like closing statements. What do you got?
Okay. Well, I think it's so great because I'm so happy that you actually like chose me to do this, that you asked me to do this. I feel like you should have chose someone else maybe, but you chose me for a reason. So thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy because you asked me to do this, and I can actually talk about what I think. And I feel like it's actually kind of hard to do that like with people my age, because it's like you don't want to bring that up, kind of almost like you don't want to talk about God, which was what I said before, like you don't, like you kind of shy away from it, but we should talk about it. And like you said, like the kingdom like should be saying stuff like about like that at church and stuff, but I don't necessarily do that, but I should, you know, we should all talk about more about God, and just because he is why we're doing this. I'm really happy that you chose me to do this, so I can tell you how I think, and that people can listen to this and maybe try and find like something that they can take away and bring something to their church.
All right. Well, we're going to close it down because you said you could talk for hours. And so I have to stop you at some point. Otherwise, I'm going to be editing for the next 55 years.
You will.
No, but thank you so much for being on this podcast. I really enjoyed talking with you. I've enjoyed talking with you anytime I've talked with you. You're just such a fun person, and I'm really proud of you. But I think you gave some great answers today. I'm really excited for people to hear this, and I think it's going to be really helpful. So thank you very much for being on. I know you said you wouldn't pick yourself for this, but absolutely I could not think of a better person to have on to talk very seriously about the church and how we can do better and what your experience is like in it. So just thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Isn't like the music going now?
Yeah.
Like dun 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 dun. It is?
It's not. No. I'll edit that later. I put it in later.
Oh. Thank you again for asked me to do this, and I'm happy. I'm happy if I help anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you did. All right, and thank you guys very much for listening in. I appreciate it. I hope you found this enjoyable and edifying, and we'll keep on doing these with different age demographics, and hopefully each one will shed a little bit of light on everybody's experience in the church. So thank you very much for listening again, and I'll talk to you next time.